He was 63 when he walked back into the dating world for the first time in 22 years. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't falling apart. He had a paid-off house, a healthy body, a calendar full of things that mattered, and enough hard-won wisdom to fill the shelf behind him. He did what the books said. He was honest about what he wanted. He showed up on time. He listened more than he talked. He didn't play games, and nothing worked. Not in the obvious ways men fail. He wasn't rejected with cruelty. He wasn't dismissed publicly. He was something quieter and in some ways harder to name. He was irrelevant. The rules he had spent 40 years learning, quietly, without announcement, without warning, had been rewritten. Nobody told him. Nobody ever does. I'm Marcus, and if you're a man over 60 who has done everything right and still can't understand why none of it seems to matter anymore in dating, this is the conversation no one is having with you. I want to say something before we go any further. You are not confused because you're out of touch. You are not invisible because you lack value. You are not struggling because something broke in you somewhere along the way. You are struggling because you are an intelligent man who mastered an entire set of rules, and those rules have been quietly retired without your knowledge or consent. Here is what I know about men like you. You didn't float through your 30s and 40s. You built something. You absorbed hard lessons. You showed up when it would have been easier not to. You became someone your younger self would have respected. And now you're 62 or 65 or 68, and you re-enter the dating world, either after a long marriage ended or after years of putting relationships last, and you discover something that no one prepared you for. The signals you were told to send: stability, experience, emotional steadiness, the quiet confidence of a man who's been tested. These signals are being received differently now. Not always negatively, but differently, in ways you didn't learn, in ways the old rulebook never covered. That disorientation is not weakness. It is the specific feeling of a competent man encountering a context shift he was never briefed on. Today, I'm going to brief you. Let me show you the 3 places where the rulebook changed on you, specifically, quietly, and without any announcement. I call these the 3 silent rewrites. Each one targets something you were told to build. Each one inverts a rule you mastered. And together, they explain why men over 60 who did everything right often feel the most lost. Silent rewrite. Number 1. Strength is now being read as control. For 30 years, you were taught that the signal of a strong man, decisive, certain, leading without hesitation, was attractive, magnetic, the mark of someone worth following. Here is what the data now shows about post-60 dating. Women in their 50s and 60s, many of whom have spent decades in marriages where strong man translated into controlling man, are now reading those same signals through a completely different filter. The quiet confidence you built? Some read it as warmth, but a meaningful number read the same posture as dominance, the same decisiveness as rigidity, the same certainty as a refusal to be influenced. You didn't change. The decoder changed. This isn't the fault of either person. It is the result of an entire generation of women arriving at their 60s with lived experience that rewired their pattern recognition. And no dating coach over 60 is explaining this to you clearly, because it's uncomfortable and because it requires them to say something that sounds like, the strength you were praised for may now need a different presentation layer. That's not who you became. That's a translation challenge, entirely learnable. Silent rewrite number 2. Provision is no longer a differentiator. When you were 35, being financially stable was a signal that separated you from a crowded field of men who weren't. Stability was rare. Stability was earned. Stability was attractive because it was in short supply. At 62, you're entering a dating pool where many of the women you're meeting are financially independent. They have their own pension, their own property, their own established life. They are not looking for someone to rescue them. This doesn't mean your financial stability is irrelevant, but it no longer does what it used to do. It no longer differentiates you. It no longer signals safety in the way it once did. What women in their 60s are looking for, and I want you to hear this clearly because it matters, is not security. They already have security. They are looking for aliveness, for genuine curiosity, for a man who hasn't stopped growing because he finished building. The rulebook said, build the security and they will come. The new rulebook says, security is the floor, not the ceiling. You weren't told about the ceiling. Silent rewrite number 3. Experience is not automatically impressive to women who have their own. You have lived. You have made decisions under pressure. You have buried parents, raised children, navigated career collapses, rebuilt yourself more than once. That weight, that heft of real experience was supposed to be compelling. And it is, to the right person. But here is the rule change nobody tells you. Experience only impresses someone who hasn't built their own yet. A woman who is 58 or 63 has her own weight, her own rebuilt chapters, her own scar tissue. Your decades don't impress her by existing. They only connect when they're shared, specifically, vulnerably, honestly. Not as credentials, as humanity. The old rule said, demonstrate your experience. Show your value through what you've built and survived. The new rule says, demonstrate your interest. Show your value through what you want to understand, specifically about her. That's not a small shift. For a man whose identity is built on what he's accomplished, being told that his accomplishments need to stay in the background, at least at first, feels like being asked to hide who he is. It's not hiding, it's sequencing. But the rulebook change didn't come with that clarification. If you followed this far, it's because something in those 3 shifts landed. You recognized yourself in them. Maybe you've been blaming yourself for not adapting fast enough, or blaming the dating world for being broken. What I want to show you now is why these specific rewrites happened, and why they hit men over 60 harder than any other group. Here is the part of this conversation that most content on men over 60 dating never reaches. Because it requires saying something uncomfortable about timing. The men who were born between 1955 and 1965, and I say this not as criticism, but as a historical observation, were handed the most specifically optimized set of dating rules in modern history, and then watched those rules expire faster than any previous generations. Think about what that means. You didn't learn the rules casually, you lived them. They became identity, the stable provider, the unshakable leader, the man who doesn't need to talk about his feelings because his actions speak for themselves. These weren't just behaviors, they were who you were. And the women entering their 60s today have been through their own evolution. Research on women in their postmenopausal years shows something consistent. Their priorities shift dramatically. They are no longer primarily selecting for security or status. They are selecting for emotional intelligence, adaptability, genuine partnership, and, this is the one that surprises men most, the capacity for growth. 2 generations, each having evolved through different experiences, arriving at the same dating space, and speaking genuinely different languages. Neither one is wrong, but one of them, typically the men, was never handed the translation guide. Now let me tell you the specific internal wound this creates, because understanding it is the beginning of healing it. The wound of the competent man. Here is the brutal truth about why the rulebook change hits capable men hardest. When a man who is average fails at something, it's painful, but it fits his existing narrative about himself. He's been managing expectations for years. When a man who has excelled, who built the house, raised the children, led the team, survived the storms, when that man fails at something, it doesn't just hurt his results, it strikes at his identity. Because for his entire life, competence was protection. Being good at things was how he ensured he was safe, valued, included. The men most devastated by dating over 60 are not the lost men. They are the men who were found, who were anchored in who they were. Because when the rules change on a man like that, it doesn't just cost him a date. It costs him a piece of the story he tells himself about what his life has meant. That is the wound no dating coach mentions. And that is the wound I want to sit with you in for a moment, before we move to what comes next. I want to offer you a reframe, not as comfort, as precision. The rules that rewrote themselves against you, they weren't wrong when you learned them. They were calibrated for a specific era, a specific dating pool, a specific set of incentives. You didn't misread the original instructions. The instructions genuinely applied. What happened is this: you outlasted the era the rules were built for. That is not failure. That is longevity. That is a man who has lived long enough to see a system cycle and who now has the rare and genuinely difficult task of updating his own operating system while fully conscious. Most men never have to do this. They stay in the same relationship. They avoid the market entirely. They adapt slowly without ever having to face the gap directly. You are facing it directly. That takes a specific kind of courage that most men at your stage never develop, because they never need it. Here is the permission statement I want to leave you with before we go to the practical path. You are not a man who failed the new dating world. You are a man who mastered an old one and has earned the right to decide, with full information, whether and how to engage with the new one. That decision belongs to no rulebook, no algorithm, no dating coach. It belongs to you. Here is the practical path, not the advice of a dating coach trying to turn you into someone else. These are 4 moves built specifically for men over 60 who understand the rule book shift and want to navigate it with their dignity fully intact. Move 1. Translate. Don't transform. You don't need to become a new man. You need to learn how your existing strengths communicate in the new context. Your decisiveness doesn't need to be buried. It needs to be paired with genuine curiosity about her perspective. Your stability doesn't need to be hidden. It needs to be expressed as security she creates alongside you, not security you deliver to her. Think of it as subtitles, not a new language. The film is still yours. The subtitles let someone else follow it. Action. Pick one strength you lead with and spend a week examining how it lands with people who don't already know you. You may be surprised by the gap between your intention and the signal received. Move 2. Prioritize presence over portfolio. The men winning in dating over 60 are not the wealthiest or the most impressive. They are the most present, fully there, genuinely interested, not performing stability, embodying aliveness. What a woman in her 60s is asking, underneath every first conversation, is this man still growing? Is there something alive in him? Or has he finished? The answer to that question is not in your biography. It's in how you engage with this specific hour of this specific day, with her, with new ideas, with anything that genuinely moves you. Action. Before your next date or conversation, identify one thing you are currently genuinely curious about, not from your past, from right now. Lead with that curiosity within the first 10 minutes. Move 3. Name the chapter you're in. One of the most powerful things a man over 60 can do, and almost none of them do it, is to acknowledge directly and without apology that he is in a new chapter, that the life he built had a shape, And this next one is his to design with different priorities. Women over 55 are in the same place. The ones who have healed from their own history are not looking for a man to complete their past. They are looking for someone to build their next chapter with. The men who name this, I'm not looking to recreate what I had. I'm interested in what something genuinely new looks like. These men immediately separate themselves from every other man who shows up performing his 40-year-old rulebook in a 2024 context. Action. Write one paragraph about what your next chapter actually looks like. Not the relationship you're trying to find, but the life you're trying to build. Know it clearly before you bring someone into it. Move 4. Protect your standard without apology. Here is the sovereign truth about men over 60 dating. You have less time and more clarity than at any previous stage of your life. That combination is extraordinarily valuable, if you use it. The men who get hurt most are those who enter dating over 60 with the same tolerance for ambiguity they had at 35. They allow undefined situations. They accept less than what they actually need. They perform patience they don't genuinely feel. You are past the age where you owe anyone your most important resource, time. Being clear about what you want, a genuine partnership, or expansive companionship, or something specific that fits your actual life, is not being difficult. It is being sovereign. Action. Define, in writing, before your next date, the 2 or 3 things that are genuinely non-negotiable for you. Not a checklist of features, a short list of values and conditions. Know them. Name them early. Walk toward people who match them. Before you close this video, I want to acknowledge something that none of the 4 moves I just gave you will fully reach. There is a specific grief in discovering that the thing you spent your life building, the version of yourself that worked, that held, that was respected and valued, that this version needs an update. Not because it was wrong, because time moved, because the world moved, because you outlived one era and arrived, intact and capable, in another. That grief deserves space. It does not deserve to swallow you. You didn't lose your value when the rulebook changed. The market changed what it's counting. Those are 2 entirely different things. Your reliability is still real. Your experience is still real. The life you built, the thing of substance that you brought to every decade, that is still real. None of it evaporated. What changed is the translation layer. And translation, unlike identity, can be learned. You've learned harder things, in shorter time, with less support than you have right now. There are thousands of men at 62, 65, 68, still sharp, still capable, still carrying everything they were told to carry, who can't understand why none of it translates the way it should. You are not the exception. You are the rule they forgot to update. And now, you have the update. I want to ask you something, not for engagement, for you. What's the one thing you built across your life that you expected to matter most in dating over 60 and discovered, quietly, that it didn't translate the way you thought? Write it below. Not because I need it, because naming it is the first step to understanding it. And because somewhere in these comments, another man is reading at 11 p.m., wondering if he's the only one who feels this way. He's not, and neither are you. If this conversation gave you something, a name for something you've been carrying, a frame you didn't have before, consider subscribing. Not for my numbers, because this community is built for men who think in chapters, not just days, and you've just proven you're one of them. This is Sovereign Male Dynamics, where the old rules end and your authorship begins. I'll see you in the next blueprint. If this gave you something to think about, if you saw yourself somewhere in this, then stay in this community. Because what we're building here is not a fan base. It's a brotherhood of men who are choosing to understand themselves. I'm Marcus. This is Sovereign Male Dynamics. And the man you're becoming, he's worth the work.